It's a beautiful, beautiful Tuesday evening right here in the heart of London, and this is TN Radio, right in the heart of Vauxhall. And Tuesdays, you know what we do. We talk politics, economics, and anything that bothers some civic development. And there's another beautiful Tuesday evening right here in TN Studios in the Vauxhall. And it's going to be a wonderful, wonderful evening. Beautiful weather tonight, and we thank God we're alive, and that's most important. Today is the 4th day of October. Yes, 4th day of October. We thank God so much for life, and that's what we have to be grateful for. Yes, of course. And what else can we be grateful for? Live and live abundantly. Yes, it's a song by Paul Simon. Yes, a wonderful one of the iconic songs of the 1980s, late 1980s in Graceland. And with the likes of Lady Smith Mombasa, led by Joseph Chabila, may his soul rest in peace. And yes, of course, it's another beautiful evening, as I said, and there's global issues. While we talk about politics, economics, and anything that bothers on civil development, yes, Lartey behind the console, and I'll be driving you through the highway of politics, economics, and this evening, and until 10 p.m. Other bodegas and the lights on over Broadway. Wearing diamonds on the soles of their shoes. Yes, of course, it's diamonds on the soles of the shoes. You hear the signature tune every Tuesday evening between 8 p.m. and 10 p.m. And we talk politics, economics, anything that borders on civic development and anything for the social, economic, political evolution of our societies and how we can be progressive people. Yes, I think that I wanted to do an update on the politics, economics, and politics, sports, and weather, but I think that the time I gave to my guest, I think is time, so probably I will go straight to the guest today. We're going to talk about, we are in Black History Month. From now to the end of the month, we will be, it's Black History Month. We will be talking about slavery. We'll be talking about Black identity. We'll be talking about colonialism. We'll be talking about, some of the iconic personalities who heralded, and fronted the epoch of, Black emancipation, both in Africa and the diaspora, and how that has, one way or the other, affected positively the social and the political evolution of the Black race. And I think that that we're going to do. So the month of October will be dedicated to the Black History Month. Yes. At this point, I think I'll be expecting call from my guest today. I'll be having Mr. Danny Matthews. We will be talking about slavery and introspection into slavery and the impact that it's had on Africa and the people, the Black race, and subsequently we're going to look at the trying to dilate, trying to examine, trying to introspect how this has affected us as Black people. Yes. So any moment from now, I'll be waiting for a call from Mr. Danny Matthews, who happens to be the UK chairman of the Labour Party, the Nigerian Labour Party. And we'll be talking about serious issues. Yes, we'll be talking about serious issues. So I'm still waiting for him to give to call in. Yep. Once I wait for him, just gonna play a quick commercial, and yeah.
Yet have life cover in place, but I've got something I want to share with you.
I am Bo. If you see so people now, any area, nanso pastanti shalom be pie mu o man mu de menti so bia de yare asiri obi da won wa akọ ne ho nyina ya dansedie nko a onyame nam ne dom so ayi a chia na ko a ye na nanmo bi biduru a no mo de sa yare wa e ma bi mu di mfinhia wo ha ne aduonu ani wo ha ne akire no odi be pie ya man mu a sa be de ode gi yankwa dodo no a na o diabetes high blood pressure stroke high cholesterol koko anasa ni dane ana obi a wani so ye usisi arthritis anasa sasabro fibroid skin rashes bema o yire fra o comfort e won paso ana oba wo pa wo nti shalom herba e o last stop ono de wo de yanya ye krom ahama ene ye nubina ene sabe o de san yare se mama yare bidin a na no ntia se oni na duro gise wadru pastor nti shalom herba ahye ansa no what de make na see enti wo a wutie me yare ba no agya tum se we de wo yare no na serious sahini nema ayare kwata na wapa anu aduru a nanso ebra oti onyame akoa odifo Elisa anka na okwahunu no onyame fa ne so esa ne yade enti yare bia wonam mu yare bia eteche wo yare bia ha wo no enne fra pastor Shalom I was 074 48 60 62 63 ana 079 30 65 7750 or 079 84 02 4164. The landline UK is 02 03 65 20 297. So what Germany so but my friend was 0049 69 30 08 89 65 and 0049 17 637043 Inti Shalom Herbal Medicine there. Aba abaji yankwa. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Yahweh, shalom. Yahweh, shalom.
I'm still waiting for Yes, I'm still waiting for Mr. Daddy Matthews to call in. And so I also wait. I'm just going to play another commercial as well. So I'll wait for him to give a call to the studio.
It has changed, and so have the issues affecting our community.
COVID-19 and the geopolitical tensions have really made it abundantly clear that the African continent has to do more to be self-sufficient from an industrial capacity point of view.
Join me, John Sewa, on GN Breakfast Show as we look at issues affecting us here in the UK, with a close eye on trending stories across the world.
When we invest from the UK into infrastructure in African countries, that it is absolutely transparent.
With a focus on Ghana's social and political issues.
I mean, it's not about you thinking about, your money, the Sikadiya Basa. It's not what our authorities should be thinking about, or officials, but rather they should think about the nation.
The Breakfast Show with John Sewa.
Monday to Wednesday from 8 a.m. on GN Radio.
Yeah, hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Hello? Donny?
Hello?
Hello? Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, Donny, I can hear you.
Hello?
Yeah, Donny, I can hear you.
Hello?
Hello? Hello?
Hello?
Yeah, Donny, I can hear you. You're on air. Can you hear me? Hello? Donny?
The world as we know it has changed. The world as we know issues affecting our community.
COVID-19 and have really made it abundantly clear that the African continent has to do more to be self-sufficient from an industrial capacity point of view.
Join me, John Sewa, on GN Breakfast Show as we look at issues affecting us here in the UK, with a close eye on trending stories across the world.
When we invest from the UK into infrastructure in African countries, that it is absolutely transparent.
With a focus on Ghana's social and political issues.
I mean, it's not about you thinking about, your money, the Sikadiya Basa. It's not what our authorities should be thinking about.
Hello? Hello? Hello, Donnie? Oh, my goodness. Hello? Hello, Donnie, you on there? Can you hear me? Hello, Donnie? Oh. I'm sorry, I just happened a bit of a lot of trying to fix the I'm trying to fix the connections and just I don't know if I can. Hello, Donnie, please. If you hear me, just respond. Oh my goodness.
So be at the
you kind of why you want
to
to my moha.
When your men am not doing so, now Shalom last one dear. What you chrome Hama and you and a Saturday Sanya. Some of my what student and workplace-based work share. I sound what to the American and to a long residence not serious signing name. Now a pan Nansu Yamiakua or D4 Elisa Anka no no Onyame fan so Asani Yade. Enti Yaribia wouldn't Yaribia at war, Yaribia Howon, and ne Frepastanti Shalom. I was 074 48 60 62 63 and now 079 30 65 77 50 or 079 84 02
Welcome to the EE voicemail. I'm sorry, but the person you called is not available. Please leave your message after the tone. After you've finished
297. So what Germany so but my friend was 00496930088965 and now 004917637043 Inti Shalom Herbal Medicine there. Aba Abaji Yankwa. Shalom, shalom, shalom. Yahweh, shalom. Yahweh.
Akosia na mutini seni. Akoda ya de se de sa jinsemu.
Ebusua. Ese de me pe no. Uyonku na si ho no. Usane mame.
Hwe, ya sorry prekupe na fa akora no kona kwagina yaresa. Adan wo wura fise ebisa wo yi efritwa kunkum ana. Samuel nwome edi kan etredu no nwotwe di chemu nwotwe no. Eho na bra na so wo ne Philippine for ekokon. Okọ oba bia no aben ewo humu. Emo de to nanim se wokokon na obewu. Asante kotokose se wote wotwo so a ehimu enu ti sorry prekupe na tutubika. Na fa akora no kwagina yarehwe. Esanse anoma wo yi ye monopo. Mama ko so hwe ab.
Hello? Can you... Yeah, I'm trying to get through to the... Yeah. Yeah, you're on the air now. Because I don't know. I was trying to get through to the Skype, but the Skype, I don't know. Trying to connect to the console, but let's see what we can be able to do. Yeah. Yeah, so Donnie, you're welcome. You're welcome to GN Studios. Sorry, can you? Yeah, Donnie.
Yeah, I'm listening. Go ahead. I can hear you very well. Go ahead.
You can hear me. Okay, all right. Yeah. So you're welcome to GN Studios. I mean, today is Black History Month, and we're dedicating the month to talking about, slavery, colonialism, and other aspects of, the Black race, and obviously commemoration of the Black History Month. Now, I just want us to kickstart looking at this. I mean, the Black History Month is from the 1st of October to the 31st of October. It's an annual observance originating in the United States, where it also known as the African American History Month, and it has been given official recognitions from countries in the United Kingdom, the States, Canada, and more recently, Ireland, the United Kingdom. In your view, what do you think the commemoration has brought? Do you think the commemoration of the Black History Month has brought any form of awakening to the Black race?
Thank you for that question. The premises of that very question is very demeaning, not from you, but that is the narrative that has been set up and that it's been made for us to believe. Black is not a culture. It's not an identity, neither a race. Black is a color. You see, it's a clever use of word, like the word used minority. Minority means you're less than equal. That's why you call minority. So the very fact that they call it Black History Month was designed on a purpose to make you feel less than, unequal than. There's no any other race. We only have one human race. But there's no that describe themselves as a color, unless racist whites and ignorant blacks. Now, I've never, even to all my family and friends, I never allow anyone to describe me as my color. Black. I have a culture, I have an identity. I don't mind you calling me an African man. Call me a Nigerian, even though I detest that. But above everything, call me an Edo man, an Isha man, my tribe. So when we say we celebrate Black culture or Black history, what is Black history? Does Black history start from slavery, or does it start from the independence before after slavery? Because that is the very premises whereby our children disassociate themselves from the continent, from their tribe, from their culture, from their identity. You see a Jewish man, even though it's like 6th generation Jewish man, who has never been to Israel, or perhaps he has, will tell you, I'm Jewish. Proudly so, even though if they practice or they don't practice the faith. You see a Muslim person or an Arab person, let's take the religious out of it, it will tell you, I'm an Arab. Just like you say a European. An American, we say I'm an American. But when it comes to the so-called African, we want to describe ourselves by color. Not by the identity to the Africanness in us, but rather by our tribe. In Africa, we don't call ourselves black. I never knew there's a race called black until I moved to Europe. And many Africans who grew in Africa, we either call ourselves by our names or we call ourselves by our tribe. You know that, my friend, that Yoruba friend, that Igbo friend, that Hausa friend, Edo friends. That is it by our tribe. So let's first of all identify the flaws in that before we start speaking in terms of celebrating black culture. The very word is an oppressive, ignorant, outdated description that needs to be abandoned. And we who are Africans should reject it by every means necessary and say, I'm not black. I'm not a color.
Yeah, but Danny, I mean, obviously, there's the white, the Caucasian white race, there's whatever, gypsies, and so I mean, technically, when somebody sees an African, the first thing that comes into his mind is that this person is black. I mean, not literally, but not really literally, but that is the physical
African
identification. Identification.
My dear African brother, listen to this carefully. It's not what you are called you identify to, it's what you identify to as a person. If I look at you and say, oh, you are a thief, you are a criminal, and I called you a thief, a criminal, would you answer to that? Why should I answer to what I'm not? A black person, a minority person. I'm neither a minor or a color. I'm a proud Edo man, Isha man. I'm a proud Nigerian, like many Africans, and I'm a proud African. Why not just say African month? Why just say African? To be very clear with you, if you look at the continent of Africa, not everybody who is black is, not all Africans are black. Not Africans are not black in color. And I don't know what that is. So do you exclude them from the celebration of the so-called African month? Not every African is black. We come in different shades of color and different race or culture, different tradition, different religion. So it's very myopic and condescending and rather disrespectful for us who know better to fall into that trap. Please.
Yeah, I understand that.
Let us start with the basics.
Yeah.
Let's call ourselves what we are, not what we've been called. No one call you a thief and you celebrate I'm a thief.
Okay.
If I call you a thief, would you celebrate it?
So you think that there's a distortion, there's a kind of distortion about the identity of the black race, and where what would you suggest, you understand, is the most appropriate? I mean, right now we live in the world of political correctness, so I mean, obviously you have to be very sacrosanct and succinct on how you try to project certain kind of debates about, because what you're saying is a very sensitive topic that I believe that it probably will have to have another probably show to try to digest it.
It's not a sensitive topic.
Of course it is a sensitive topic. The identity of somebody is a very sensitive topic, is it?
It's not a sensitive topic. It's a difference between ignorance and fact.
But before we go on, do you think I understand that, but do you think that the African has been able really to establish himself in terms of finding his identity as a figment of negritude? You understand? I mean, we live in a time that a lot of black people they are ashamed of their identity. You ask somebody, he says that, listen, I was born in England. I was born in the UK. When actually his roots come from Jamaica or maybe Nigeria. He prefers to identify himself as a British. Now, do you think that, are we not part of the problem with the issue of black identity? I mean, as a people.
Africans know themselves. When you go to Africa today, nobody calls that black race. We call ourselves our tribe. Some may call us our nation. But nobody calls itself our color or call each other man. So there are some people who will refuse to identify of their own nature or tribe. Some people who are born third, fourth, fifth generation who don't know where their ancestors, African part of their ancestors came from. That is fine. That does not take away from their race. That does not take away from their identity. There are generations of Jewish people. There are generations of Spanish people in America. If you look at the Latin identity that you or culture that people attribute are people with that. What is black culture? What is black identity? No, I can tell you what black culture is. The black, the movement. Let's look at it. If black culture means the movement of the civil rights movement, is that what we call black identity? We have independence fight in Africa before civil rights movement. So that makes us blackish. We have the independence fight before nationalism. People will say, oh, there's a consequence of African Americans. It's an polluted BS. Either you embrace your Americanness or you embrace your Africanness. And you can be an American to be an African. You can be British to be an African. You can be European and be an African. And you can be an African and be an African. Either color, race, religion, or whatever tribe you belong. It's not a sensitive issue. It's either between foolishness and wisdom. It's between stupidity and common sense. It's that simple. Let's get back to your original question.
All right. Okay. Danny, we're going to take a quick commercial break. Then when we come back, we'll continue. All right. Okay.
abusuafo yɛde dwumadie foforɔ ɛbrɛ mu wɔ GN Radio. Your friend of worship and inspiration every Sunday evening between the hours of 7 and 9 p.m. Daniel Kweku Datson and Amanda Ofori at this dwumadie ɛbrɛ. Make sure that you tune in. It's going to be an awesome moment of worship, God's word, conversation, gospel celebrity interviews, Bible knowledge, and what have you. And also your comments. I want to hear from you, your testimonies, what inspires you, and a lot more. Make sure say on miss our program every Sunday evening at GN Radio. Worship and inspiration. Your weekly inspiration starts from here.
The world as we know it has changed, and so have the issues affecting our community.
COVID-19 and the geopolitical tensions have really made it abundantly clear that the African continent has to do more to be self-sufficient from an industrial capacity point of view.
Join me, John Sewa, on GN Breakfast Show as we look at issues affecting us here in the UK, with a close eye on trending stories across the world.
When we invest from the UK into infrastructure in African countries, that it is absolutely transparent.
With a focus on Ghana's social and political issues.
I mean, it's not about you thinking about, your money, the Sikadiya Basa is not what our authorities should be thinking about, or officials, but rather they should think about the nation.
The Breakfast Show with John Sewa.
Monday to Wednesday from 8 a.m. on GN Radio.
Yes, we are back to the studio, and this is GN Studios, and this is Global Issues, the platform where we talk about politics, economics, and anything that borders on civic development. The time is exactly 37 minutes after the hour of 8, and this happens to be the 4th day of October. Yeah, believe it or not, the 4th day of October, just about 3 months more to draw down the curtain on 2022 and also in 2023. What have you been able to achieve during this period? Obviously, it's important for us to do our introspection of what we've been able to do over the year, but not to probably drift away from what the discussion. I'm just going to read one commercial, one advert, then I'll get back to Mr. Matthews, and we'll continue our discussion. B-Deck container liner shipping news. Attention, importers. Trading as Osafo or Sajafo shippers is pleased to advise it's very important. It's a regular worldwide services from worldwide port of origin arriving Tema and Tagradi ports. Call us today for our worldwide attractive rates to ship your cargo to Ghana. BDAC container line will offer you an early and safe arrival of your cargo to Ghana. Do not hesitate to ask for further details. BDAC shipping Ghana Limited, BMT Terminal Office Tower, first floor, Number 612 Fort Lane, opposite the railway station, Tema Port. Email BDEG, that is BEEDEG at bmt.com.ghana. Yes, bdeck at bmt.com.gh. Telephone is 233 0303204227, and you can also call 0790464 388 You can email fifi2009 at hotmail.co.uk. Your satisfaction is guaranteed. Door-to-door Ghana. BDEC shipping. Yes, that is the end of the advert. Yeah, we still have Mr. Donny Matthews. He's the chairman of the Labour Party UK chapter, and we're talking about slavery. Yeah, Mr. Matthews. Hello, Donny. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So now let's go on. Now, in the United Kingdom, Black History Month was part celebrated in October 1987, which was also which coincided with the 950th anniversary of Caribbean emancipation. Now, the centenary of Marcus Garvey and the 25th anniversary of the OAU. Okay. And yes, institution dedicated to the progress of African states. Now, from your viewpoint, do you think that Marcus Garvey contributed to the awakening of the African in the modern times? You think that Marcus Garvey contributed, and in its awakening, because Marcus Garvey agitated that there was a need for Black people to go back to Africa. Now, to what extent do you think that this impacted on Africans?
Thank you very much for that. Please, just for the purpose of this discussion and perhaps other people, can you just correct one fundamental? I don't subscribe to black thing is a color. Let's just take to African history month. And Marcus Garvey, speaking of our people going to Africa, it's a good thing. Only how many years to this point that many African Jamaicans, African Americans, African Europeans, who or even first, second, third generation Africans ignore that advice. The moment Africans across the globe go back home to Africa and go back more frequently, much more frequently, the less and less the ignorance to be, and the less and less the oppression and hatred. Because they feel there's no alternative, and they can abuse, take advantage. Look at what's happening among Africans, Americans in America today. They're beginning to reclaim their identity. They do business between themselves. And it's very difficult back in the days to portray an African American anyhow on the paper and they're silent and nothing could happen. Because they're beginning to connect. Once you're beginning to connect to your roots, to yourself, you can have true identity or true happiness. And as regards to Marcus Garvey, trying to further that Africanist movement, and say that starts with a lot of Africans from the life of Nkrumah of Ghana to the life of Obafemi of Nigeria to the life of Nelson Mandela, even no matter what you say about to the life of Mugabe of Zimbabwe. If the moment you start saying to African Americans or those who call themselves black and start making them identify with those roots of Africa, the moment you start doing research about the African people, the moment their pride, their sense of entire, the sense of humanity will rise.
Yeah, but then do you think that this very soon we'll come to start looking at slavery, but we'll look at the trans-Saharan slave trade before we come to the transatlantic slave trade. Now, but lastly on that topic, do you think that most people, most blacks in the diaspora, are willing enough to go back to find their roots? Do you think that there's those that are born third, fourth generations, the younger generation, more specifically the millennials? Do you think these millennials, these young ones who were born probably, mid 80s to the early 90s, whatever. Do you think that some of them don't want to really associate with their black roots? And don't you think it's a worry?
Where is the black root?
Okay, let's put it the African roots. Let me put my argument right. The African roots.
They would. The moment you start educating them about their African roots, they would want to associate with it. Just like the way Jewish people educate themselves and they ask about their Jewish roots. That's like the Spanish people. It's only Africans. Where is the colored root? Where is the black root? It does not exist. So there's no point in them trying to associate, identify with a continent, with a tribe, with a culture that does not exist in Africa. But the moment you tell them it's their African root, the moment you start telling them about their African origin, there is a place to go and research it. It does exist. That place you can feel, you can touch, you can smell, you can see the people. If I tell your kid that he's a Ghanaian, he has a Ghanaian root, your side will want to, the next question is, where is Ghana? Ghana is in Africa. Which part of Ghana are you from, Dad? Or where are you from? If we tell you, your side is interested. If you tell your side it's an African root, what is that? What is the African root? What is the minority root? What is the color root? You see, this is what you must understand. The moment you identify as black, all they want you to identify with is slavery. The moment you identify with slavery, it's a subconscious thinking and it's subconscious brainwashing.
All right.
They're not teaching you slavery.
I think we can go on and on with that topic. Let's look at let's probably put a let's put this thing the break on that, and let's look at slavery. I want us to start with the trans-Saharan slave trade, because the trans-Saharan slave trade also plays a very monumental aspect of our of the African evolution of the black identity. But it's more often than not, it's like we tend not to speak too much of the trans-Saharan slave trade now. And these were slaves that were transported across the sub-Saharan Africa to North Africa to be sold to the Mediterranean and Middle Eastern civilization. That a small percentage to now the total estimates of the black slaves from sub-Saharan Africa to Muslim world was 11 million, between 11 to 17 million. Okay, between the 7th and the 21st century. Now, these were mammoth statistics of inhumane treatment that were given to Africans, especially those in the sub-Saharan Africa. But little is spoken about, or I mean, when we're talking about slavery, how do you hear people talking about, or academics, given some sort of, credit or some sort of reference to the trans-Saharan slave trade? Because I mean, that was a slave trade that was actually existing, or before the coming of the Europeans. But little is said about. I mean, looking at the statistics, there were huge numbers that were moving into slavery, but little is discussed about that. Do you think that is not relevant?
You're right. Right there, brother. Number one, we can talk about the transatlantic wherever. We can talk about it, and we can talk about the Sahara trade. If you know it. However, what we can never stop talking about is the inhumane of it, the discriminatory element of it. It destroyed half of the northern part of Africa and some part of South and West of Africa. The Trans-Saharan trade, let me digress. This is why I cannot believe anyone who says they believe in any foreign religion that destroys the nation and African continent as a true African. The Trans-Saharan trade is just as diabolic as any Western trade. Do you know what they did to the African male in the Trans-Saharan trade? They castrated them.
Danny, please, can you get a bit closer to your phone, so that the audience, it could be much clearer, a bit clearer, because it seems your voice is a bit down.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I said the
it's
Trans-Saharan trade is the most inhumane and the most inhumane thing that could ever happen. People were castrated, people were killed. In that process, Africans were really dehumanized. That's why you look at the Arab world, you hardly find any African dominant. However, in the West is different. The trans-Saharan trade is far more evil than even the Western slave trade. As such, I do not believe in anyone who will embrace any religion that from the trans-Saharan trade as a good African. It pains me to talk about it.
Yeah, but I mean, this was
my phone is dying. My battery is dying. And I don't want to cut this conversation halfway. But since I have to. So I want to apologize to the audience and to you that this is about 1% left. This conversation cannot carry on. I hope we can do it another day by the grace of God. But I love this topic. Time. It's got 1% left. And I'm out in the meeting. But by the grace of God, this African History Month, we should talk about African leaders who fought for independence, who fought for the end of slavery in Africa. Not just Martin Luther King in America or Marcus Garvey. We have people like Efun Shetan in Lagos. We have Yalode of Lagos. We have Efun Shetan in Ibadan. We have so many people in Africa. When we talk about African independence, from the like of Nkrumah to Awolowo to Thomas Sankara to Nelson Mandela. Those are the true heroes that we should be talking about in this Independent Day. Not the sport people. There's still some heroes living today. So Mugabe is a wonderful, fantastic human being. But the West wants you to think he's evil because he said there's a land reform. May God help us. May God help us. Thank you, my brother. Thank you for listening to me. And I will call another day. I'll have an opportunity to speak with you. Thank you. This one is going to cut off now. And I apologize for it. Thank you
all right. Yeah, I mean that was Mr. Danny Matthews, and unfortunately, he was somewhere at the meeting, and for some reason, his battery had went out, and therefore, probably I'll have no choice than to continue from here. Yes, I mean we're talking about the Black History Month, and obviously, we would have loved to have him till the end of the program, but I mean, as you said, I think he has a problem with the phone or something like that. So, looking at the trans-Saharan slave trade, I mean, subsequently, next week I'm going to have another guest here, where we are going to talk about colonialism, because obviously colonialism is it's a product of the slavery, more specifically the trans-Saharan slave trade. Before Danny went, I was asking him about the impact of the trans-Saharan slave trade, because the trans-Saharan trade, looking at the statistics, there were mammoth statistics of people who apparently were sold into slavery from sub-Saharan Africa to the Islamic world, or Northern Africa, if technically if we would probably establish that fact that these were huge numbers, 11 million to 17 million. But the point is that anytime there is this debate, this heated debate about slavery, little is talked about the trans-Saharan slave trade. But meanwhile, this was a kind of in-house, debilitating, inhuman, diabolical, cynical, activity, where one race was subjected the other race to inhumanistic, inhumanistic kind of treatment. But little is talked about, this trans-Saharan slave trade. Why is that so? Because it also it earmarks, or in other words, has a place in history of how Black people were treating themselves before the coming of the Europeans. That it wasn't as if that everything was holy. There was, as if the Africans were holier than thou. These were atrocities that were happening right at the doorstep of the continent, where more than the we have most of these issues that were happening because of there was a lot of infighting, there was a lot of exodus of tribes, and this period in time during the medieval era where there was a lot of, for example, we had the Ga people migrating from Yoruba land through Togo, Benin, and the like to, the current place of abode led by Oni Okakwe, and for example, the Ewas were led by Kinakogoli, and it goes on and on and on. Now, there were these issue of people the invader settlers who had come to take over the Aborigines, the invader settlers. The invader settlers, for example, had come with a greater military, kind of machinery and system and good, effective leadership as compared to most of these Aborigines who were less equipped to fight back, and therefore they took over these, the lands and things like that. Now, these wars and spates of wars happened, and those that were defeated were sold into slavery. In some instances, some were beheaded and things like that. Now, there was this aspect of, there was the other aspect of, this issue of bad cultural traditional practices during that period in time. We had the widowhood rights, and we had ritual killing, killing of humans, and female mutilation, and it goes on and on and on. So why is it that these atrocities were happening, and it seems as if that most often than not we tend to obliterate, or we tend to be oblivious of some of these humanistic activities that actually were happening at that point in time. But we are so much passionate about the transatlantic slave trade. Now, so it goes on and on like that, and obviously, this over the years, recently, when the Queen died, there were this issue of there's this issue of Jamaica and other countries, some other countries in the West Indies that are demanding for self-determination and to become, they claim that still they under some form of colonialism, where probably we might say that neo-colonialism, because if the Queen is still the head of the Commonwealth and they are yet to be a republic, then of course there is an issue of still at some level of imperialist oppression. But the question we have to ask ourselves at this point in time, some have agitated that. It opens for it's an open debate that some people have agitated that the white people or Europeans left too early from Africa, because since the time of independence, Africans have not been able to manage their own affairs, as Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said that the black man was capable of managing his own affairs on the day of independence. But whereas Ian Smith in 1964, he was the Governor General of Southern Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe. He said that the black man, if you give the black man 1,000 years, he will not be able to govern himself. Has posterity proven Ian Smith right? Or what has happened? What is the real problem with Africa? What is really the problem with African identity? Yes, of course, there was slavery. There were a lot of people that were transported along the coast. For example, Paul Lovejoy, a Canadian academic in African history and African diaspora history, who is currently a research professor and chair of the Canadian research at York University, states that there were about 6 million black slaves that were transported across the Atlantic. This is equal to the numbers that were massacred during the Holocaust, of the Jewish, in 1945. Now, the statistics are mind-blowing. Talking about the trans-Saharan slave trade, obviously about 11 to 17 million people were transported, and sold into slavery from Sub-Saharan Africa to Northern Africa. and some were sold in markets, some were sold, and from some of the research that I did, I mean, when these people were being transported, I mean, it, you cannot say that you are sick. And sometimes what happened was that they used to use hot metals, stand on the stomachs of some of these slaves. I mean, just a quick information. At 9, the system is going to shut down. Then, of course, the system is going to reset itself for the next 2 or 3 minutes. Then we'll be back again. So until that time, yes, I mean, I'll keep on then until the system shut down. Then, of course, we're going to resume in the next 2 or 3 minutes after the system shuts down. Yeah. So as I was saying, these numbers were so colossal, and subsequently, some people were transported. For example, around somewhere 17 years, 1576, had the first batch of black people that was transported to Brazil by the Portuguese, and others were also transported into the Americas, into the sugarcane plantations. Yes. I'm going to sign off now. I'll be back soon. We're back to the studio, and after the short break, yes, normally the system shuts down at 9, and resets itself again. And yes, we're back again to the studios and this global issues of the platform where we talk about politics, economics, and anything that borders on civic development. Yes, Mr. Danny Matthews had to leave us because I think he had a problem with his phone. He was at a meeting whilst contributing, and I think the phone went out. And a big apologies for that. But I'll carry on from here. Just look into this issue of slavery because I mean there are a lot of debates about um, the level of impact that slavery has had on the African, how slavery distorted the geopolitical, framework of Africa. Because before the coming of the white man, before the coming of the white man, we had um, for example, I mean, in Nigeria, we had Yoruba land, we had there was Igbo land, there was Hausa land, and so technically we had three territories. I mean, and after independence, there was amalgamation of these territories. Some believe that that distorted the geopolitical and the geopolitical strength and the sovereignty or the kind of ethnocentric the ethnocentric framework that Nigeria had. Equally in Ghana, I mean the we had northern part of Ghana being designated at the northern territories. Then of course we had the southern colonies, and some believe that I mean these have some altered probably the ethnocentric again the ethnocentric framework. Of course there was the chieftaincy. We had the chieftaincy. We have the chiefs or the chieftaincy, where these were they were the political and military leaders at that point in time, before the coming of the Europeans. And to some extent, it's believed that the coming of the Europeans, in other words, mitigated and subverted the authority that some of these chiefs had, especially the British. The British used the indirect rule system to rule the African, Gold Coast at that point in time. I mean, and using the chieftaincy institutions to rule, more of Anglophone Africa than the French used what is known as assimilation association to rule the Francophone colonies like Mali, Ivory Coast, Senegal, and the rest. And to some extent, these are debates, these are arguments that have over time emerged as some of the critical factors that the coming of the whites, the Europeans to Africa, incrementally affected the social, the economic, and the political evolution of Africa. Now, looking at the Atlantic slave trade, there are a lot of arguments that recogitated the fact that the transatlantic slave trade had greater impact on Africans as compared to, I think, the trans-Saharan slave trade, and therefore more of a concentration is given to, the fact that you had people, the Europeans and other foreigners who had come and disadvantage us, disadvantage us as a people, to evolve on our own as Africans and bring in their own kind of education, bring in their own form of culture, sophisticated culture, because before the coming of the white man, I mean, we had no form of, form of education. I mean, what the kind of education that technically there was is being trained at home, or probably learning a trade, going to fishing, but the black man, the Europeans brought education, brought foreign medicine and other the building of architecture, infrastructure, and stuff like that. Now, so I mean, can we say that there is some level of advantage that we could have taken as a people as per the coming of the Europeans? I mean, the first time that the Europeans, the Portuguese, set foot on the Gold Coast was in 1440 and came back in 1471. You understand, 1471, technically to trade. The whole idea was the fact that they had come to West Africa because of the high deposits of gold and other, resources, salt and other things, that they felt that these were commodities that were good for the industrialized world. And at that time, the medieval, Renaissance, of the West, that had emerged, and therefore there was. I mean, let us not forget that, for example, England at that time was not Great Britain, was not Great Britain or the UK. The UK came into being on after the promulgation of the Act of Union in 1701. Before 1701, there was no UK. We had we had England, we had Wales, we had Ireland. These were separate geopolitical entities at that point in time. So the promulgation of the Act of Union brought these units together to become great, the Great Britain, become, and that's why we have the originally England has its flag or whatever, called the St. George's Cross, and then of course the Union Jack symbolizes the amalgamation of the other the other three geopolitical units, that is Ireland, Wales. Yeah, that's Ireland and Wales, and I think, yes, Scotland. Yes, I mean, but with time and right now, the fact that the monarchy is gradually experiencing some sort of hemorrhaging as per the passing away of the Queen. Some of these countries, I mean, want to be independent. For example, Scotland has been act as to effectively work its way through its sub-regional membership with the European Union. And the fact that, I mean, Scotland has its own deposits of oil and feel that they can be on their own. I mean, subsequently, we've had also other, when we come to Africa, we have Biafra that wants to break away. Now, so we have all these things, and these are some sort of history that comes to being, and therefore history has a whole huge barrage of happenings. The heroicity of a people is very critical, and so is was slave trade to Africans. And as Danny will say, he doesn't want to refer to Africans as black people, because black is color, and that is no identification of what he meant, and it's quite denigrating, as Danny said before he left the show. But the identity of Africans and the fact that is a that some of us has given up our identity as a people through civilization, through cross-cultural experience. I mean, people have, especially, I mean, the younger generation in this part of the world, most of whom want to be identified as British rather than Africans. I mean, you see a young child, he was, and you say that you say that where do you come from, he will say that he's British, he was born here, instead of saying maybe he's Jamaican or he's Ghanaian or he's Nigerian. You see most of these young generation of it. So do we think that the older generation is not doing enough to educate the younger generation about the African roots, or is it that even the older generation find it difficult trying to find some sort of a position of stability, stabilizing them, their identity or their negritudeness? And this is something that I believe that we have to look at, and more so during the Black History Month, which is very critical. Trying to look at some of these things. As I said, next week, hopefully, I'm going to have Kofi Ali over here, and we're going to talk about colonialism. But until that time, I want to still talk about, and then an American historian by the name John Thornton stated that he specialized in the history of Africa, diaspora, and Atlantic slave trade. Now, he's a professor at the department at Boston University. Now, he says that a number of technical and geographical factors combine to make European and the most likely people to explore the Atlantic and develop its commerce. Now, he identified there as being the drive to finding new and profitable commercial outside of Europe. Additionally, creating alternative trade networks to that controlled by the Ottoman Empire. Now, so Taunton is of the view that, I mean, it was quite obvious that it was Europeans who would definitely come to seek, come to explore, or better still, exploit Africa because of the natural resources that Africa had. Now, the question we need to ask ourselves is that the natural resources that Africa had, was it the case? Because primarily, the reason why the Europeans came initially to Africa was the fact that they wanted to come and trade because of the great deposit, the natural deposits that, I mean, we had from the gold, the diamond, salt, and other commodities, that were very much needed for, the development of the West at that point in time. Now, could we say that if Africa was that not endowed, the Europeans would not have come to the shores of Africa to trade, and subsequently, because it was as a result of coming to trade, getting to commerce, you understand, that they discovered that slave trade will be another plus for developing, especially the Americas, where there was huge sugar plantations in places like Virginia and I think Pennsylvania and other places, and therefore there was a need for human resource. I mean, they had come to Africa because physically, as compared to the other races, were much more, much well built, and we were very hardworking because obviously they had come as a result of the trade and other resources, and they had seen how hardworking Africans, I mean, subsequently they had probably witnessed how we are so much, very much hardworking, going to the farm and other things, and therefore they felt that, oh, this would be a great opportunity in order to smuggle some of these people to the next world. But we shouldn't forget that in as much as there were the slave raiders who captured some of the slaves, there was a huge number of Africans, tribes that are sold um, their tribesmen or other tribes into slavery. Okay, there were these experiences of their evidences of other tribes selling other tribes into slavery as a result of wars, as a result of political upheavals, as a result of geopolitical, or in other words, some sort of infighting for a land space or otherwise. Okay, so the blame, it's very difficult trying to lay blame as to where. Yes, of course, I mean, there are people who would want to quickly lay blame at the doorsteps of the Europeans or perpetrators such a diabolical act. But do we is it right that we lay blame solely at the doorsteps of the Europeans? I mean, that is a question that I believe that we have to. It is high time that we introspect as Black people. That do we solely lay blame for the transatlantic slave trade at the doorsteps of Europeans when, in somewhat way, there are physical evidences to validate the fact that other Africans actively indulge in the slave trade, selling other Black people into slavery, selling them to their slave, to the whites, and taking them to to the other world. I mean, during the 18th century, thereabout, there was spate of wars between the Dentreds, the Ashantis, the Gans, and when these people go to war and they lose, what happens is that either they behead the leader, or the king or the chief, and they take the captives. They sell the captives into slavery. So there are evidences to buttress this argument. These are not just abstract kind of debates. There are physical evidence, there are materialistic evidences, you understand. There are relics and regalias that are there to support this argument, or this assertion that Blacks, or in other words, other Africans, were actively involved in the slave trade. Stand in the slave trade, and more specifically the trans-Saharan slave trade, to the slave masters who had come to build forted castles, some of which was, we have some in Ghana, the Cape Coast Castle, the Mina Castle, the Christianborg Castle at Tosu, and the forts that were used in keeping these slaves until they were shipped into the other world, as it was known, into the plantations, and to do other kind of any humanistic kind of jobs. Now, so slavery, slavery has been for years now, almost about 200 years now, slavery has been abolished. But what is it that, until we are in 2022, but what is it that is so much alive in the minds of Africans, that we are so unforgiving about slavery? Why we are not ready to forgive the Europeans about, or for that matter, the perpetrators of this act, of slavery? Why is it that we are belligerent? Why is it that we are unforgiving? And we want to take revenge. Africans want to take some sort of revenge by demanding apology, and demanding reparations, for the acts of, this diabolical acts, that, because it is quite a diabolical act to want to oppress another race, in other words, to denigrate another race, and use another race for your advantage, which I believe that is not very, very godly, because we are all created in the image of God. But what is it that motivated Europeans to come to Africa? Yes, of course. What is it critically that motivated? Yes, of course, we know that they had come to trade, they had come, but which other factors do we believe that had motivated, more Europeans to come to Africa to want to exploit Africa? Yes, of course, Africa has a lot of great resources. They had come to trade, they had come to create networks, but were they other reasons why? For example, Don Diego de Azambuja, the first naval, Portuguese sailor who came to the shores of Ghana, or for that matter, that time in Gold Coast, had come to exploit the possibilities of trading. But subsequently, they had come again to look at the prospects of, the slave trade, because at that point in time, the slave trade had begun to take another dimension, and the high profitability, value of selling slaves, with this time, was quite high, and other European countries had come join, in the slave trade. Now, subsequently, that brings us brothers to the Berlin Conference, the partition of Africa, where European countries, most of these European countries had, gone to Berlin, to Germany, in order to decide how to partition Africa. The French, the Belgians, the Leopold II of Belgium had summoned this meeting in order to see how Africa could be partitioned at that point in time in 1884. Now, technically, we will see from some of these assertions, some of these history, that at the point in time, Africa, the West or Europeans now considered Africa as their property. Okay, so the West or Europeans had now at this point in time considered Africa as their property, and therefore, we had the British, we had the Germans, we have the Belgians. And it goes on, and principally the French also. We have the British, the French, the Belgians, and the Portuguese. These were the principal, and I think the Italians. Okay, they had come to consider Africa as some sort of annexation to Europe, seeing Africa as some sort of a reserve where they can use human resource to build the West, or in other words, to build Europe. And for that matter, they had decided to become the de facto controllers of, the affairs of Africans at that point in time. Now, this time in question, also, the Africans also had started nursing, the passion for freedom. For example, we had the Aboriginals' Right Protection Society in Africa, in Ghana, Gold Coast, which was led by Kwabena Sechi and other, Kwabena Sechi, other great leaders, political leaders at that point in time, who were fighting for the liberation of Africa at the point in question. By that point in time, obviously 40 years before the 1884, we had the bond of 1884, a bond of 1844 that was signed by Commander George McLean, who was the Governor General at that point in time in the Gold Coast, and with signing agreement with Ashanti chiefs, the Fanti chiefs, that the British, for the next 100 years, by the next 100 years, would have left the shores offward, the shores of Ghana, or for that matter, Gold Coast at that point in time. Now, by 1944, which was 100 years after, they were still there, and what were the reasons why they were still there? And Kwame Nkrumah felt that that was not the agreement, and that was a breach of agreement, and therefore the British had to go. Some have argued that the British, or in other words, the imperialists, left too early, and then if they had stayed a little bit longer, Africa would have been better off than what it is now. I mean, obviously, people have different sides to the story. People have different versions of that argument, and I believe that. I mean, as time goes on, during the Black History Month, we are going to look at some of these issues. I mean, colonialism. Have we looked at the positives of colonialism? For example, education and other aspect. I mean, the other day I was listening to Paul Ademochri and was doing some kind of exegesis on colonialism, and he talked about the fact that the British brought a cure for malaria. It was because by then, that period in time, malaria was killing people, and the British brought malaria. Now, have we sat down to look at the positives of colonialism, and probably look at how maybe we might have sidelined the positives in working for Africans and just concentrating on, the negatives of colonialism, and for that matter, slave trade? I'm going to take a quick commercial break. When I come back, I'll continue.
The world as we know it has changed, and so have the issues affecting our community.
COVID-19 and the geopolitical tensions have really made it abundantly clear that the African continent has to do more to be self-sufficient from an industrial capacity point of view.
Join me, John Sewua, on GN Breakfast Show as we look at issues affecting us here in the UK, with a close eye on trending stories across the world.
When we invest from the UK into infrastructure in African countries, that it is absolutely transparent.
With a focus on Ghana's social and political issues.
I mean, it's not about you thinking about, your money, the Sikedia Basa, is not what our authorities should be thinking about, or officials, but rather they should think about the nation.
The Breakfast Show with John Sewua.
Monday to Wednesday from 8 a.m. on GN Radio.
Akosia na motini seni akoda ya de sese de sa di nsemu
Ebusua ese dia mepa no yonku da si wono usani mame
hwe ya sorry prekupe na fa akora no kona kwagina yaresa adan wo wura fise ebisa wo yi efritwa kunkrum ana samwa nwome di kan etredu no nwotwe di chemu nwotwe no eho na bra na so wo ne Philippine fo ekokon okọ oba bia no abe ewo humu emode to nanim se okokon na obewu asante kotokose se wote wotwo so a ehimu enu nti sorry prekupe na tutumirika na fa akora no kwagina yarehwe esanse anoma wo hoye ye monopo maame kosohwe abo ni papi wonyo meti se yimu opeme okonechi na wasan ababiem sese de onnam posene kane no wonim se obabia cha adwaye a na osiesie no honhum yade te se obaidi honhum attack adayeso basabasa kodanna abrabo na sinitrase ayemhyehyie wo hyehya na adwiregu abrabo mu adeso biada wo ba abrochire hayi ya santo apenso nanso wonko a wusia na ebu wo hyehya na adwire obopa na esane sikato wonsam a na ahye kai na hunu se obiara nu a watumi atumirika esan otwen ho da ma wo ho enye hare na wo de na ankoye se abrojuma a woforobo wieye na afio obeka se wonu no ho wonu yade adokotafo entimi ansa no enumpo eno ye ho adwuma from mame kosohwe wo ahoman so 079084699914 079084699914 ana 0740580734 0740580734 mame kosohwe ana yetwe no a yetwe botentim
Yes, we are back to the studios, and that was another break. Yes, that's Global Issues, the platform where we talk about politics and economics, anything that borders on civic development. This is the Black History Month. From now to the 31st of October, we will be talking about, history, slavery, colonialism, black identity issues, and are we still are we still at the crossroads of, as finding ourselves as black people and rediscovering ourselves as black people? Just a few years ago, just about a couple of a few not too long ago, there was there was this demonstration. There was the George Floyd demonstration in America, where George Floyd was killed, in cold blood, and that brought some sort of a campaign in order to reignite, the heartbeat of Dr. Martin Luther King, the civil rights, movements, and subsequently the Black Panther, led by Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael. And in back in the UK, obviously, Cynthia Jarrett and Kenny, Benny Grant and Achaba, we have the likes of Achaba Asibo, who trailblazed the Black History Month of in the UK 1987. Now, so Asen Wong and some of the great names who had been very instrumental in bringing awareness to Black history in 1987 at that point in time. Yes, I would trying to see if I could get in touch with some of these people, but until then, I think that we can be able to try to dilate some of these issues from our own perspective, and see how far the black race or the African race. We keep on talking about black, we keep on talking about African, used interchangeably. But as Danny said before he left, he feels that the use of black is a kind of denigration, is a kind of dehumanization of the African, trying to identify somebody by the color and not the person, not the person in question. Black is a right to use the word black for identifying somebody. We have in the UK normally hear certain words like minority and things like that, and there has been debates, there are growing concerns about the usage of some of this. They feel that derogatory nomenclatures to try to identify humans. In 1830, there was a human theorist by Houston Chamberlain who tried to create some sort of a theory about the humans, where he created in a kind of strata of the types of humans, the gypsies, the Caucasians, and subsequently, as you always know, the black people, Africans, were put at the bottom of the strata. And these were some of the kind of theories that Hitler used, in trying to, Hitler used in sidelining and marginalizing the Jews in the Holocaust. Now, these are theories, these are machinations of one race against the other, and that brings us to the topic of human race supremacy, that one race feeling that they are more supreme than the others. What makes one race feel that they are more supreme than the others? Is it by color? Is it because one race feel they are more intelligent than the other? What is it that Africans are doing that constantly, incessantly, persistently, we are always downtrodden as Africans? We are always put at the bottom of the ladder, when it comes to trying to talk about, people, we're trying to talk about races. Blacks are always at the bottom of the ladder. Blacks are always described as people of no pedigree. Blacks are always described as people of no, humanistic importance. What is it that Africans are doing wrong, or what is it that we have done wrong over the years? I mean, is it that we have been too dependent on the West? Is it that we have not been conscious of ourselves? I mean, not too long there was the homecoming in Ghana, where the president had organized a homecoming for diasporans who had, been in the in America, the UK, and there was a mammoth, homecoming, Deba, where we saw the likes of the likes of Steve Harvey and other great diasporians who graced the occasion. Now, the question we trying to ask ourselves is that now these homecoming, this homecoming of these diasporians, how is it bridging the gap? Are they coming just because of the fact that they are just coming to see the forts and the castles, and the way that slaves were treated, the way that slaves were treated during the trans-Saharan slave trade or transatlantic slave trade? Or are these people coming to see their roots and connect with their roots? Because it is one thing coming just to see Africa, go and see, you understand, go and see the forts and the castles. I mean, as form of tourism, and the other aspect of these diasporans trying to connect with Africa. Now, I mean, Marcus Garvey was of the fact that was of the view that the need for a year of return to for black people or for Africans who were in the diaspora to return back to Africa and to their roots in order to be able, to lift up, or in order to contribute to the development of Africa. Yeah, and yes, of course. I mean, the trans-Saharan slave trade, the slave trade, the slave trade, to a large extent, destabilized destabilized the unit, the African unit. I mean, we shouldn't forget that the African unit was we were so much, very much extended, the extended family system, where we had, father, mother, children, and, communal living. There was this communal living that characterized, African communities before the coming of the white man. Now, the school of thought, there is that school of thought that believes that the coming of the white man or the Europeans destabilized, that arrangement, that ethnocentric arrangement, that anthropological or sociological arrangement, where there was a close unit, close knit, between, people within the African community. Another point was that there was the destabilization, as I've said, the geopolitical arrangement of, most of these, the geography of Africa, and subsequently has affected the evolution of Africa. Yes, of course, there was the third argument. There's also the third argument that the coming of Europeans ripped Africa of its major resources like gold, diamond, and other essentials that the whites, or for that matter, the Europeans, needed at the point of Renaissance. And the early stages of the early stages of development and industrialization, if I may put it, in the West or in Europe. Okay, now this is back in history. This had happened 500, 600 years ago, and slavery has been abolished 200 years ago. But the truth of the matter is that the impact, the heat of slavery is still being felt. The relics are there, the physical evidences are there, and still we still feel that we still are having the impact of slavery. Some believe that even the creation of the Commonwealth is some sort of a machinery used by the imperialists to steal in some way, form, or shape to still colonize its colonies, or for that matter, Africa for some reason. You understand? Because still, some colonies or some countries have the Queen or the British monarchy as what heads of state. So to them, they feel that, to some scholars, they believe that it is still um, colonialism, or for that matter, the new form of colonialism, which is referred to as new colonialism, is still, in existence, but in a more refined diplomatic way. Stan. Now Ngogi Wantiongo, one of Africa's learned scholars, he's a he's a Kenyan scholar, and he wrote a book on the colonization of the mind, and where I believe he was of the view, um, he's of the view of the need for Africans, trying to emancipate themselves from the shackles of colonialism. Now, P.L. Lumumba, also a legal luminary and also a staunch Pan Africanist, has also added his voice in this direction of the fact that it seems that we as Africans, or for that matter, Africans, are still we're still in the quagmire of self pity. We're still in the quagmire of self pity, not still finding some sort of strength, inner strength, in order to fight on and break ourselves from the shackles of imperialism, of slave trade. You understand? I mean, slave trade, the aftermath of slave trade, the impact of slave trade, and it goes on, and colonialism, neocolonialism, and other forms of the dehumanization of a more superior race against a less superior race. Now, this debate goes on and on, but the question is that, are Africans ready in order to be able to emancipate themselves? I mean, over the years, I mean, we've had programs like Emancipation Day, and where people come from the diaspora, as I said, to come into Ghana and go to the forts and the castles to see remnants of the slave trade, and more specifically the transatlantic slave trade. And some of them go, they see these people, they see these relics, the forts and the castles, the dungeons where some of these slaves were kept, the very dehumanizing and denigrating, shameful treatment that were given to these slaves. you know, and some of them shed tears. They shed tears, and some of them become very angered as to how their forefathers were treated. Now it's been 300, probably close to two and a half or something like 300 years after the slave trade. But is it not enough that, I mean, at this point in time, we make a U-turn of healing ourselves from slavery? The impact of slavery. Yes, of course, the slavery. There's still the evidences, the physical evidences of slavery. The doctrinal impact. When I say the doctrinal, the philosophization of some of these beliefs, some of these beliefs, which is colonialism, neocolonialism, Nazism, and all the other kind of racist colonialism and racist ideologies and doctrinal beliefs that kept kept the African in shackles, kept the black man, if we should put it inward, okay, in shackles. Now, when are we going to break free? Why is it that it's very difficult as Africans to break free from the shackles of slavery and the impact of slavery? Yes, of course, the pain, the experience was mammoth. What has happened has happened. And there's a need that there should be a reference point to some of these things to believe, to show the African where he had come from and where we are now, and subsequently where Africans want to go to as a people. But we are in 2022, but it still seems that the African is still trying to find its feet in terms of, economically, politically, geopolitically. The African is still in the quagmire of controversy. The quagmire is still in a space of controversy and confusion as to finding his feet or finding that position within a global space where the world and the West have moved on. We live in a time of digital experience. We live in a time of iPods. We live in a time of Tesla. We live in a time of space shuttles. And yet the African is bent on fighting the imperialists, fighting the West of the atrocities that has happened to them. It's not time for Africa to break free, from this deadening experience, and break free, because it's over 200 years that minds are occupied with these things, and it's perceived that this has been a setback to the development and the evolution of the Africans at this point in time. So yes, of course, the harm has been done. Yes, of course, the impact is there. Yes, of course, the future has to be lived. But what is it that we live in for posterity? And what is there that we are going to live for? I mean, gone are the days that there was a lot of, anathema for cross-racial, interracial marriages. Now we live in a time that black people are marrying. It's more fashionable these days, where you see black men marrying white women, African ladies also marrying other races. Now, so it tells you that the world has moved on. The world is more multicultural than it used to be, and the fact that human beings have allowed themselves some space in order to break free from the incarceration. The incarceration of this so-called human supremacy, and be able to break free in order to build a new evolving experience of experience of humanistic evolution, where we consider everybody as equal. But in as much as this is the case in the 21st century, still there are certain levels of racism. There are certain levels of the impact of neocolonialism. There are certain levels of the impact of humanistic supremacy, that is still existing within the confines, the periphery, in the perimeters of geopolitical evolution, no matter how you want to look at it. Therefore, it is important that these things we talk to. So, during this Black History Month, and we're going to devote this time to deepening understanding about how some of these things has affected the Black or the African race, how we be able to emancipate ourselves from, or extricate ourselves from, the attachment to some of these rather dominating historical experiences, and how to break free from some of these things. Because when you look at this introspectively, you realize that these are some of the things that is setting us back. It is good to have a reference point. It's good history is good because history tells you what has happened in the past. History tells you about the mistakes. History tells you about, the atrocity. For example, I mean, it's always important for Ghanaians to understand where Ghana has come from in terms of its political and social economical evolution. The spate of coup d'etats, the spate of um kind of political destabilization, and of course the way that the constitutionality over had been subverted over the years, and therefore it puts us in the position to put some sort of landmarks in order to be able to not to repeat these mistakes, and therefore create a new kind of space to evolve and be better people, in terms of our politicking, in terms of finding some solutions to the economics of the country that we had received from the forefathers who had shed blood in bringing independence or self-determination to Ghana. And we can equally extend that understanding to a much greater spectrum, and looking at the African continent. Because, for example, I mean, Kwame Nkrumah said that the independence of Ghana is meaningless until it's linked with the total liberation of Africa. That we shouldn't only look at as individuals, because I think that one of the reasons why the Europeans were able to conquer Africa was the division, the gross division that existed at the point in time among the tribes, among the ethnocentric setup of some of these, tribes, and some of these, establishments that existed at the point in time. So therefore, it's very important for us to be able to look at these things from a more advanced and um, debate platform. And as I said, hopefully next week, I believe to have Kofi Ali here. He's a seasoned social commentator, and we'll be looking into colonialism. We'll be looking into the pact of colonialism, and at a point in time, we will dedicate some time in looking at the forebearers of the civil rights movement, and how their contributions have affected or impacted, the renaissance of the African at this point. In the 21st African is seems to enjoy a bit of freedom as compared to what happened in the 60s and 50s. And I mean, we're still counting. Yeah, we'll look at the likes of Dr. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Kwame Ture, and Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, and some personalities during this Black History Month. Yes, of course, it's important that we pay reverence to some of some of the heroes.
Obsessed.
Some of the heroes.
Ready? Right.
We pay allegiance to some of the heroes that have made Africa what it is, today. And it would be a disservice to history if we don't pay, reverence to some of these people. So this Black History Month is it's fully packed, and make sure that you do not exclude yourself, because it's fully packed. We're going to talk about serious issues, and we're going to see how probably the African can be able to reinstate himself as a force to reckon on the global space. This has been Solomon Lartey on Global Issues. Make a date with me every Tuesday between 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. where I talk serious issues with serious people. Until next week, make a date and do not be late. I'm out.
Diamonds on the soles of her shoes. say she's crazy, she got diamonds on the soles of her shoes. Well, that's one way to lose these walking blues. Diamonds on the soles of her shoes. She was physically forgotten, but then she slipped into my pocket with my car keys. She said, you've taken me for granted because I please you, wearing these diamonds. And I could say, ooh, as if everybody knows what I'm talking about. As if everybody here would know exactly what I was talking about. I'm talking about diamonds on the soles of the shoes. She makes the sign of a teaspoon, he makes the sign of a wave. The poor boy changes clothes and puts on aftershave to compensate for his ordinary shoes. And she said, honey, take me dancing, but they ended up by sleeping in a doorway by the bodegas and the lights on over Broadway, wearing diamonds on the soles of their shoes. And I could say, ooh, and everybody here would know what I was talking about. I mean, everybody here would know exactly what I was talking about. I'm talking about diamonds. People say I'm crazy, I got diamonds on the soles of my shoes, yeah. Well, that's one way to lose these walking blues. Diamonds on the soles of my shoes. Ta-la-la-la, 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 ta-la-la-la.
Try the Vileda Turbo Smart. Removes over 99% of dirt and bacteria with just water. Vileda. It feels great to feel at home.
Dimmi cosa è successo, sono ancora non soddisfatto. Se non c'è un problema appeso, se non penso non ci rimango. Se non chiudo non fumo e non bevo. Con le G, con le grammo scemo. Con i G per un G che peso. Se non G, se non senti io credo. Baby, cada mo sono ancora in piedi. Faccio rap ma anche la bevi. Se non porto la testa ai piedi. Che sprazzo, un futuro però ancora incerto. Dici che non sono più lo stesso. Se non ci fossero senti e penso